Four Noble Truths is the very four pillars, we could say, or the four foundations of the Buddha's teachings. So if anyone were to approach the Buddhist philosophy, and a question would be asked is, what is Buddhist philosophy? Then one would have to answer it in the context of recognizing the realization of the Buddha in terms of what are known now today as the Four Noble Truths: Noble Truth of suffering, Noble Truth of cause of suffering, the Noble Truth of the cessation, that a cessation is possible, and then the Noble Truth of the path that leads to the cessation. So, as many people know, Buddhism, the word itself, is coined very later on. So it's not so much an ism of some kind that one has to go through a radical, particularly a radical external change of adopting a philosophy or a religion or a spiritual belief. And when we say Buddhism, what we essentially mean by that is that it requires a person to cultivate an introspection within one's own self. So it's not so much an external adoption as much as is an internal reflection. What Buddhism teaches is that. And so because of that, from His Holiness the Dalai Lama to many of the teachers, they speak about how the essence and the meaning of the Buddhist path of reflection, of contemplation, may actually enhance their own existing spiritual belief, or without a spiritual belief may enhance the human potentials. Why so is because of, if we see it from the perspective of the Four Noble Truths, we find that Buddhism doesn't teach about following someone or adopting a certain philosophy, but rather it talks about the very basic principle of human experience, beings' experiences. And that being that every one of us, while we have a core nature of basic goodness, which aspires happiness, which aspires constructiveness, which aspires beauty, which aspires all things that are positive, yet constantly are faced with the challenge of not being able to actualize that aspiration. So having a potential and yet not being able to use that potential is often, in the philosophical language of Buddhist teachings, referred to as the Noble Truth of suffering. So yes, the general notion of what suffering is may be all the different kinds of apparent abject suffering that is there, such as anger, such as pain, such as violence, or such as the resultant states of experiences which are generally referred to as unwanted suffering. But then there's a deeper understanding of the suffering, which Noble Truth of Suffering points out to, is that we have a potential that we're not able to really manifest, because of which what we want often is out of our reach. The happiness that we seek is often something that we're not able to cultivate. So the Buddha's own spiritual journey and analysis led him to then seeing that it isn't going to solve a problem if we reflect on only the consequent states of experiences, but rather a person would have to go deeper into what causes them, and that's the second Noble Truth of cause of suffering. And so a lot of the approach in the beginning stages of Buddhist meditation is directed towards seeing this confusion that we unnecessarily create because of the inability to really reflect and address our own sort of intrinsic nature, the basic good nature. And because of that inability, constantly creating a momentum, a continuous momentum of what we call impulses of moving away from your own actual potential, true potential, which is then referred to as the cause of suffering, ignorance. Not ignorance as just sort of foolishness or stupidity, that is also one aspect of it, but more so an ignorance of not knowing, ignorant of one's own basic potential as a human being. The kind of abilities you have that you do not really tap into, because of which it sets off many other impulses which may not always be able to manifest what you are actually capable of manifesting, such as loving kindness, such as genuine harmony, such as having deep sense of contentment and joyfulness of contentment, and instead not being able to really tap into that internal resource, you create a momentum of restlessness or anxiousness or apprehension or aggression or extreme insecurity, which leads to attachment. So that then is seen as different aspects of cause that leads to suffering. And so then the latter two noble truths, which are called cessation and the path that leads to cessation, the third and the fourth noble truth, reflect more on not only recognizing the problem, but then also finding that since it is something that is being generated within one's own self, the causes of suffering are being created within one's own self. The natural potential that could eliminate that ignorance is also within one's own self. Therefore, the recognition aspect of it is knowing that a cessation is possible. Cessation of suffering is possible. But that possibility comes when you uproot the confusion, the ignorance of not knowing one's own true nature, the basic human nature. And so that then leads to the fourth noble truth, which is path. And today what is called the Buddhist teachings, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist contemplation, all the philosophy and the teachings that we have, this comprises the fourth noble truth, which is all the many different, very skillful as well as very profound and helpful paths that are there that would enable one to be well equipped with the methods of reflection, of generating confidence, of generating the perseverance to go deeper within, to make more strong one's own awakeness, one's own true nature as a human being, which would be able to withstand the forces of all those impulsive actions that we get into, which impedes one's own ability of generating genuine happiness, genuine harmony, intrinsic, which would then be able to manifest externally into the environment. So that's so much the focus, if we look at it in this way, addresses much more a sense of the need for every human being to be responsible for whatever good potential that they have. And that is the main emphasis of the Buddhist teachings. So in that way, if we look at it, then we find that one could benefit by being a Buddhist and then implementing that and working on this and realizing the Four Noble Truths and the essence of one's own true nature. But on the other hand, it is also something that can be integrated with, I think, every other philosophy, every other way of thinking.